Welcome back to World of Immersion. Today we're going to be ranking the top 10 rides at the one and only Alton Towers Resort. Now recently we had the chance to visit Alton Towers on our huge European trip that we just came back from. Be sure to check out all of our videos on the channel and specifically check out the vlog from Alton Towers. We were very impressed with this park. I think the park is incredible and they have an amazing ride lineup. Now, we're not going to be just doing coasters on this list. We're going to be including all rides in the park. Do be warned, though, there were a few rides we did not get the chance to check out, so be sure to keep that in mind as you're going through this video. But yeah, I'm very excited to talk about this park. This park really impressed us. It's actually in my top 10 theme parks overall. Be sure to check out that video if you haven't already, where we rank all 10 of my favorite theme parks that I have been to. But before we start today's video, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss when we have brand new content. We are posting daily, so be sure to stay tuned for all of these brand new videos. With that being said, though, let's get right into this incredible park. Now, starting off at number 10 is a ride that definitely really surprised me, and that is Oblivion. Now, this was the world's first the world's first B&M dive coaster, and honestly, it was a lot more fun than I imagined. I knew going into it that was a very short ride, but the drop was really good. It was a much bigger drop than I originally expected. You dive really far underground. It's a very cool visual spectacle watching this ride off-ride. Now, like I said, it is very short. It's literally just the drop and then one turn into the brake run, but that drop is a ton of fun. I really can't put it any higher on the list in my opinion, though, just because it is so difficult for me to put a ride that short any higher. But like I said, that drop is a ton of fun, and something that I found really interesting is they're running 5 trains on this, which is insane for how short that ride is. But great operation, that line moves super fast. Running 5 trains is incredible. But moving on to number 9. Now this is unfortunately a ride we did not get the chance to check out, but this is where I guess I would put it. And that is going to be Rita. Now unfortunately it was under refurbishment when we were there, so we did not get the chance to ride it. It definitely looks solid, but it looks like probably the weakest out of the rocket coasters by Intamin. The layout doesn't look that super interesting after watching a POV. The launch looks like it would be fun, but honestly, it's just a bunch of turns, and I have heard it's decently rough, so I think that's why it comes in just so low in this list, in my opinion. But like I said, we did not get the chance to check it out, so maybe it would be a lot higher. Comment down below if you've been on Rita and what your thoughts are on it. If I have it way too low, let me know. If I have it way too high, let me know as well. But moving on to number 8 is a ride that we had a lot of trouble getting on, but honestly, it was very impressive. It was a very cool ride, and that is going to be Hex. Now, this is one of those madhouse rides where the whole room is flipping around you, but this one had a great story. I think there were like 4 pre-shows, which felt like a little bit too much in my opinion. Some of them were a little bit redundant, but it was cool that this ride is built inside the actual Alton Towers. So it's in a historic site. It is very cool in there. The walls around you are very well themed, and just overall, I think it's a cool experience. Like I said, the story is great. It's definitely the best storytelling I've noticed on one of these madhouse kinds of rides. In my opinion, they get a little bit repetitive after doing so many in Europe, but this one was definitely one of the better ones. I really enjoyed this ride, and I would definitely recommend checking out if you get a chance. Do be warned though, this ride seemed to go down a ton when we were there. It went down 3 separate times when we were in line throughout the entire day. Luckily, it doesn't get too crazy of a line, which is good, but it's still a really cool ride, and I would highly recommend checking it out. Now coming in at number 7, this may be a bit of a shock to people as it is a very well-known ride, and that is going to be the Smiler. Now, don't get me wrong, this ride is a visual spectacle to look at, and it is crazy, but it is very rough. At least the ride that we rode, it was almost unbearably rough. It was one of the roughest coasters I think I've ever been on. The layout is very cool, and it is fun doing those inversions. It does get a little bit repetitive at times. You just keep going upside down. There are 14 inversions on this coaster, more than any other coaster on the planet. But like I said, it is definitely pretty rough, and that queue is so hard to wait in. We ended up buying a fast pass for this ride because we could not stand waiting in that queue. It is almost all outdoors, and once you get indoors, there's no air conditioning, and it's just like a metal box heating you up. The station also isn't very well themed. This was definitely one of the worst themed coasters in the park, in my opinion. The theme itself is cool, but it seemed like it was very aged. It is very cool to look at, though. I would argue that this ride is almost cooler to watch than it is to ride, in my opinion. And what's very interesting about a ride that's so focused on inversions is my 2 favorite parts of the ride were the 2 airtime hills. I thought those were great. I wish it had more of that. But I get it. It's focused on inversions. That's kind of what it does. And it is still very cool to have said I've ridden the Smiler. A very famous coaster. But moving on to number 6 is a ride that pleasantly surprised me, and that is going to be Galactica. Now, this was the first B&M flying coaster, and you can very much tell that it was the first attempt at a flying coaster. Some of the elements feel a little bit wonky. The part where you're lying on your back Definitely feels weird. I think they perfected that part of it with the pretzel loop. I think those are a lot better on the newer flying coasters. But it was still a ton of fun. It was one of the smoothest coasters I've ever been on in my life. This also suffers some of the same things, though, that the Smiler does, where the theming definitely is a little bit old. You can tell that they haven't really kept it up as much as some of the other rides in the park. But it was a ton of fun. Had great operations for a flying coaster. I know it's difficult to have good operations, but they were running both sides of their station, and they were sending out those trains pretty quickly. And I just liked it. It was a very graceful ride. Flying around through the forest was a ton of fun. I like that you can't see the full layout. And just a really solid ride to have in the park's lineup. Not the best in the world, but a great supporting coaster. Now moving on to our top 5, and all 5 of these rides very, very pleasantly surprised me. They were very cool. And coming in at number 5 is a ride I barely knew anything about before going in, and that is going to be Nemesis Subterra. Now this was a very cool experience. I don't want to spoil it too much if you haven't done it already, but it's very much a full experience. It combines a few different kinds of ride systems. It's a very themed experience. There's a whole storyline. I think it's a really, really cool ride, and I highly recommend checking it out if you are ever at Alton Towers. It's very much one of a kind. I don't know if I've experienced anything even remotely like it anywhere, but it's a ton of fun. There's a very hidden surprise that I think is really cool. And like I said, it is a full experience. There are multiple different scenes. I think it's great, though. I would definitely recommend checking this one out. The theme is really cool, and it ties into the same theme with the other rides in that land, which I think is cool. The whole land is very cohesively themed. But moving on to number 4 is a ride that also I didn't know a ton about. I knew it featured a drop track, and that is going to be 13. Besides the drop track, I knew almost nothing about this coaster, but it was a ton of fun. Very, very well themed. The first half is all right. It's cool you're going through the forest, but after that drop track, that backward section is so much longer than I thought it was. I thought it was just a little bit of a backward section, but you go around backwards for a long time, and it is very well themed in there as well. Also, the drop track was one of the most intense drop tracks I've ever been on. It was a ton of fun. This is definitely a family coaster, but it's got a dark theme. It's very, very spooky in there, and that drop track is really scary, so I don't know if I'd recommend it for families, but I thought it was a ton of fun. It was a really great coaster, and one of my favorites in the park. I love themed experiences that combine thrill and theming, and this, I think, does it very, very well. One of the coolest family coasters on the planet. Now moving on to our top 3, and at number 3 we have Wickerman, the GCI family coaster, thrill coaster. I'm not sure what to call it. It's definitely rides the line between family and thrill. For starters, I just want to say that this is one of the smoothest wooden coasters, if not the smoothest wooden coaster I've ever been on, which is great. The ride experience is also really, really fun, but like I said, it's definitely a little more of a family coaster, not the most thrilling GCI I've ever been on, but the layout is very unique, diving through that huge Wickerman statue. That's very cool while it's on fire. I think that's amazing. The ride is just a spectacle to watch. This is one of the best pre-shows for any roller coaster I've ever been on. It is a great pre-show. The storytelling of this ride is awesome. The theming and the queue is amazing. The theme overall for this ride is really great. The whole queue is very, very well themed, and the ride experience continues on that theming as well. Like I said, diving through that huge Wickerman burning statue, that is awesome. This ride just overall is a ton of fun. I definitely recommend checking this one out. I feel like almost everybody can enjoy this coaster. It's not too crazy intense, and like I said, it is very, very smooth. Now moving on to number 2 is going to be Nemesis Reborn. Now this is another one of those rides that I had heard so much about, a very, very famous coaster, and this ride did not disappoint. It is one of the most intense inverts I think I've ever been on. It is crazy. There's not a single big drop on the ride, which is very different than all the other inverts I've been on. Instead, it slowly, gradually builds up speed, and then all of a sudden, you're going so fast, you don't even know how you got to that speed. Right before you hit that loop, it is one of the most intense moments I've ever experienced on a coaster. I'd say my one complaint with this ride is that it is a little bit short for an invert, but it's not that bad. It's definitely around the same length as something like Batman the Ride. But the layout is very, very unique. One of my favorite inverts just because of how unique it is. And diving through all that rock work is so cool. It is a very themed invert. It's a great experience. The theming in the queue is also really cool. And that station is one of the coolest stations I've ever seen. You're inside like this huge alien thing. Very, very cool ride. Definitely one of the best inverts out there. One of my favorite rides at Alton Towers. But it's not my number 1 in the park. And this might be very surprising to a lot of people. My number 1 ride at the entirety of Alton Towers is a ride that I didn't even know existed before coming to Alton Towers. And that is going to be Curse at Alton Manor. This dark ride is truly incredible. I think it is one of the best dark rides I've ever been on. I knew absolutely nothing going into this. I thought it would be some sort of old ride. I later learned that it was one of the newer rides in the park, actually. But I didn't know that going in. I just saw the facade, and it looked like a very cool facade. And I am a huge sucker for dark rides. I think dark rides are better than coasters, in my opinion, if they're done well. And this ride was done very, very well. Our entire group came off in shock about how good that ride was. It is very scary. It's one of the scariest dark rides I think I have ever been on before. And it is a ton of fun. I definitely would recommend checking this one out. It feels similar to like Haunted Mansion, except it's a lot darker of a theme, and it is very, very scary. It's a super long ride too. It goes fast at some parts. I think this ride is just incredible though. I could talk for hours about it. I don't want to spoil too much. You just have to go out and experience it, or if you're not going to get a chance to experience it, look up a POV so you can see. But I'm sure POVs don't do it justice because this ride was incredible. And like I said, we all knew nothing going in, and that's the way to do it. It was awesome going in, not knowing anything, and coming out in complete shock. But that's going to do it for our video today. That's going to be our ranking of the top 10 rides at Alton Towers. I know it's probably a very different ranking than a lot of people have, so be sure to comment down below what your ranking is of the rides at Alton Towers, as well as if you've been before. Thank you so much for watching World of Immersion today. Stay tuned for all of our other videos, and we'll catch you in the next one.